if you look at search terms, there's usually two phases where people go to Google and seek help. The first one is, how do I find a co-founder? And the third one is, help my co-founder is.
Today on the podcast, we have the pleasure of being joined by Tanis Jorge, who is a serial entrepreneur and renowned expert in the co-founder partnership space. She's written an incredible book. She has an amazing track record spanning over 2 decades of founding and scaling innovative tech startups. She founded Trulioo, a leading global identity verification company that achieved unicorn status in 2021, and where they raised almost $400 million. She's the author of the Cofounder's Handbook and the founder of the Co-Founders Hub. Welcome to the podcast today.
Hi, Jaden. I'm excited. I'm excited to be here.
Well, super excited to have you on. I would love if you could talk a little bit about like what got you into tech in the beginning, a little bit about your journey, because I feel like you have a really unique journey getting into this space.
Yeah, it was very unintentional, actually. It was one of those stories where, outside of high school, we decided that we weren't really going to do the college or university. It wasn't really something that was in our sights. And so I ended up with my best friend in high school. He reached out to me a couple years after we graduated, and he said, listen, I have this idea for a business. And I honestly wasn't at all interested in the topic, but what I was excited about was that because of our friendship in high school, this was maybe another opportunity for us to do something together. And so it was more actually my interest in doing something fun with him than it was to actually build a business. So it was more that journey that kind of got me into it. And so it wasn't really about thinking, oh, how are we going to make money or what kind of businesses it's going to be. It's going to be like, how much fun adventure are we going to have? And so we actually slipped into the industry that we found.
Okay.
And, yeah.
Well, that's so fascinating. I want to get into that because this is a big part of the story, but I am curious, like getting started growing up, did you ever think you were kind of like entrepreneurial or was this kind of like a brand new concept for you?
100%. I think I was groomed for entrepreneurship because my family, I grew up, my dad was a door-to-door vacuum cleaner salesman for a portion of his life. And in that time, he really grasped onto like self-help concepts, sales concepts. And so when I was born when I was growing up, my dad always was very much about teaching me those real concepts about, you're in charge of your own destiny. And one of the things my dad used to say to me all the time, and this is like truly an entrepreneurial mindset, was life is just a numbers game. If you stick to something long enough, you're going to have success. And so in my mind, like sky was a limit then. There was nothing that was not available to me because clearly it just took time and effort to do it, and then you could succeed. And so my dad was an entrepreneur, my brother and my sister were entrepreneurs, and nobody had an academic background. So I think that's why education was not something important. So I think that's where that grooming came in from entrepreneurship. It was like natural. Oh, I'm probably going to start a business.
Okay.
Yeah.
So cool. Well, a couple things you said that were interesting. Number one, I love the concept of it being a numbers game. I don't know what it is. I feel like it definitely feels like an older profession, but like the whole door-to-door salesman thing reminds me of like Zig Ziglar and
was my dad.
like all of these
Totally.
but like and Tony Robbins, like a lot of stuff that I actually like subscribe to today. Like I don't do door-to-door sales or anything, but they're like so beneficial for your mindset, and then that benefits anything you do in business. So that's cool that he was like kind of in that space and got was around that, and then you were able to benefit from it.
Totally.
Okay, so I'm also so curious. You didn't go to college.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people have like different opinions. I even know people that like have started successful companies and then afterwards they're like, but I still need to go to college. I want that college experience. What was that like for you, like deciding you never needed to do that? And obviously you've been incredibly successful. Yeah. So people say like you do or don't need college. What's your opinion? Are your kids going to go to college?
Hopefully not. I always say I'll be so disappointed if you go to university. You know what? I think I think for me, when I was in high school, again, so Stephen was my best friend in high school, and we did a lot of school projects together. And I think we both just thought differently. And we didn't kind of conform to the rules that school kind of required. And so we would do school projects together, but we would always sort of take a different way. But then we would fail the project because we didn't answer the 10 stupid essay questions. And it's like, but we just did a full like edited video of the project, and we went completely out of the box in this way. But you just really wanted me to answer this worksheet of 10 questions. And I remember we both thought, this is so dumb. Like, this is so, the focus is so on the wrong thing. And so I think for me, in our high school experience, we were just really disenchanted with it. It just made no sense. Like, why are you teaching me how to graph a parabola in math, and you're making me feel really bad because I'm failing math? But I don't know anyone who's graphing parabolas. Like, when am I going to use this, right? And so I think for us, we just became really disenchanted. We didn't see it as practical and relevant in life. And so we just sort of bucked against that system. So I think that's why when we graduated, it wasn't even in our sights to go on to college or university, maybe for the experience. But even that, it was like, oh, there's more fun things to do. We can work, we can travel. And so that was the route that we went.
I love that. Well, something I think that's interesting about that is it's like, if you're not going to college, it's like instantly 4 years that technically you could be spending working on your business 100%. Or growing something or doing something. I think that's interesting. I had an experience in college where I went, studying business, doing a business management degree or whatever. And I literally at this one point had like this class that I was taking. I think it was like some supply chain class or whatever. Right. And it required so much work. And at the same time, I was going to business school because I wanted to start businesses. I had this opportunity to work with this company and put together this deal for them. And it was taking so much time that I knew literally between this one class I was taking and this deal, like one of them had to go. And so of course I went with the business thing. I ended up making like $11,000 from helping them put together this deal. And it was cool. Awesome. Failed the class. Literally had to retake the class the next semester. And it was so funny to me because I'm like, here I am in business school learning how to do business, but I'm failing the business school and succeeding in the business. Sometimes it can feel a little funny.
It's so true. And I think that irrelevance just doesn't work for some people. And I think that if you don't see how it applies to your life and you don't see how it's helping for a lot of people, it isn't about the experience. It's actually about the education. And when you see you can get it in real life better, like you actually had a class in doing that business, that was the class. And so I think there's certain people just wired to buck against it. And so,
Okay, that's so fascinating. So I have so many family members that would be a huge fan because like I still went to college and stuff because my parents did and whatever, that was like the thing to do. But I have other family members who are also very successful. And they say the same thing as you. They're like, I'll feel so disappointed if my children go to college. So I think it's awesome. So my question to you, so you're with your co-founder, you decide you want to start this new thing. Tell us a little bit about what that first venture was.
Yeah. So the first venture was bringing online credit reporting to Canada. So at the time, Stephen had been in the US doing some work and was denied a cell phone because his credit report wasn't up to par. And so he went to check it online, and it asked, what state are you living in? And he recognized that this service of getting your credit report online was only available online in the US. Canada, you had this old, antiquated system. You had to mail in forms. It was like very analog. It was very old. And so he had this idea, why don't we bring this service to Canada? And so that was the first concept. So we had no understanding of credit reports. I remember we both our first introduction to a credit report was us asking, what is that? So we had no idea what those were. We had no idea about identity. We had no idea about the regulatory environment of a government and how we are all identified. So it was all this stuff we didn't understand, but we saw a need, and it was like, well, there's got to be a way to do it, right? So that was how we first jumped into that. And one of the things I talk to a lot of people about when they're struggling on coming up with an idea for a business, one of the greatest things you can do is find something that's working somewhere else and just copy it and do it in your country or in your state or in your province, whatever it is that where you are. And there's no shame in that. It's finding a need and being able to bring it in. And that sometimes is a great gateway to an idea for someone who can't maybe come up with something fresh, but they can come up with something that's already available and then duplicate it. And so that's what we did. And that was our first business.
I love that. That's such a good piece of advice. And also a small anecdote on that. Wasn't your business partner, your co-founder, wasn't he in California because he was going to become like a big musician?
Yeah.
Whatever happened to his music career?
Yeah, it didn't happen.
Ever sing again?
He never did. He never did. That was just some fun antidote and some story that he has to his thing. But he didn't end up doing that.
All right. I always wondered how the music career was, if he ever sings in the office.
No, not at all. Not at all. If anything, I'm the singer in the office.
Okay.
To an annoyance to everybody. It's like, can you stop singing along to the radio? Yes.
That's awesome. Okay, so you guys you start this thing because you obviously see a need. It's not happening in Canada. Coming from Canada, even to this day, there's definitely like, don't even get me started on phone plans in Canada. They are
don't get me started. No.
Ridiculous. Okay, so you get this thing started. How like, was this a huge smash success? How was this received at the beginning?
Yeah, we were the classic startup story, doing it out of the basement of Steve's house and really just navigating our way through just the basics of entrepreneurship and coming up against issues. We did raise from friends and family. So I think that was a really important piece of it because when you're getting money from your parents and your parents' friends, even if the checks are small, you feel that sense of responsibility that we've got to make this work because we're going to pay them back. And so that was a big piece of it, was having this little influx of cash that we were able to use to help build our business, but had that weight and responsibility. So that was a big key. One of the things we did in all of our businesses, but even in the first one, was we identified our exit right off the bat. So we knew that probably if we could build this business online, just like they are in the US, that company that's doing it in the US will probably acquire us because they can have now expand their market to Canada.
Oh, okay.
So we actually built our first company with an eye on acquisition. So the touch and feel of the website, how the verbiage that we used really was intentional, knowing that hopefully at some point and someday they're going to come calling. And that's what happened. It was about 3 years later, we got a phone call from them saying, Experian, yeah, exactly. And saying, hey, we see what you're doing. Can we meet up? And so that was, a real intention that we put in the beginning and actually ended up being something that we were able to exit the company with.
I love that. I feel like so often we just start things and we're like, we just want it to grow and go and we'll see where it goes. But I think maybe some of this comes from, your background with your dad and his sales and stuff, but really the visualization and the planning and trying to design where you're actually going plays such a huge role in getting there. I do have a question though. So I know, I don't know if this has anything to do with it. I know Experian does credit reports in Canada and the US, but they're not the same. So like I got my first credit card in Canada when I was like 18 or whatever, got a credit score. Then I moved to the US and was like, all right, like I want to buy a house in the next whatever amount of time. Like, actually, you have no credit score. You have to start all over again.
Right, yeah.
But is Experian on both sides?
Yeah.
Is that...
It's a global company, but it doesn't... The information doesn't pass borders. Okay. So you have to... Yeah, you unfortunately have to start all over again when you're in a new country. Or maybe fortunately, you go
move to a new country and get a brand new credit score if it's bad in your last one.
That's a good point.
Okay, so you guys sell to Experian. Yeah. What was that process like? Was the acquisition like some life-changing amount of money? Was it just kind of tell me about like how that felt?
Yeah, the acquisition, what was interesting as we engaged in that experience of having Experian's a massive company and we were just two, young kids. We were probably would have been 23 at the time, I guess. Just navigating that whole space. How do you negotiate with their M&A department, coming in? And, we made a few mistakes. One of the things that we underestimated was our ability as the founders. We brought in, at that time, what we called our gray hair. He was an older gentleman that was there to help us navigate raising capital, but we always thought we needed an older guy in there to... I don't know, just make us be more legit. You know, we were really, but he was the one who actually ended up messing up when the number got put out with what we wanted to be acquired. Their head of M&A said, "We think your company is valued at," and then this guy stopped him and said, "We think it's worth this number." He didn't even let him say the number.
No.
And Stephen and I are in the room going, did that just happen? Like they were literally going to say what they thought the number was. Show your paper and first. They leaned back and they went, "Oh, okay." And I don't know where that would have went. I don't know if they were going to go higher. I don't know how low they were going to go. In the end, we always say that in the acquisitions that took place we wanted more, but we would have taken less.
Okay, yeah.
So that was how all the acquisitions went. Was we wanted more, but we would have taken less. And so yeah, it was great. It was it was a decent amount of money that gave us the capital we needed to head into our next venture.
And was that already at the top of your mind? You sell your first company, or already like planning on what your next thing's going to be?
Yeah, no, actually, I always joke that after every business, Stephen and I kind of shook hands and was like, well, that was great. With no eye on what was next, almost always believing each business concept that we came into was such a fluke. Now looking back, no, we positioned ourselves really well. But at the time it felt, how are we ever going to get this kind of opportunity again? And then I always joke that entrepreneurship is a bit like the mafia. Just when you think you're out, it sucks you back in. And so that was us. So we didn't have intention, but lo and behold, within about 9 months, our next concept came in.
Okay, and tell us, what was the next concept?
Yeah, so the next concept was that Experian also didn't really have a foothold into Canada. And without getting into all the logistics, there was a third bureau in Canada that was sort of focused in one particular province and hadn't really expanded yet. We knew that Experian wanted to acquire them.
Into like Quebec? Or?
Yeah, exactly. Into Quebec. And it was a family business, and they were a little hesitant with working with an American company. So we came in and actually helped them expand nationally. And then we worked as the orchestrator of the acquisition. And in that, through their acquisition, our company that we formed to help them, we negotiated our acquisition as well as the same time. So, so yeah, it was more about like a marketing and a scaling of their business that we helped them with. And then Experian saw us at the table again, like, going, "Hey, oh, it's them again." Yeah. So that was the second company.
Okay, so you're now in two companies. You guys shake hands. You're like, "Well, that was crazy. We did it twice."
Yeah.
What brought on the third?
Yeah, the third company was actually helping an organization called Kroll International expand into Australia and Canada for identity fraud products for insurance products. And so same thing with them, help them expand into 2 new territories that they didn't have before. Same scenario. All of our business took about 3 years to build. And at the end of those 3 years, Kroll basically acquired our channel as well, like our business in that respect. So again, that was our third acquisition. And just again, an opportunity in a space that we didn't chase, they came to us. So I think the key to those 10 years of our business life was, being able to find a niche, positioning yourself. We always called ourselves the Switzerland of identity. We never got into exclusivity in anything. So that companies, when they came to us, they didn't ever feel like, oh, they're owned by this organization or this piece. We left ourselves open to work with everybody. And it depends on your market or what industry you're in. That's like an important piece of information. In the identity space, it's very small. There's a lot of companies coming and partnering together. And sometimes you can be stuck with one. And we made sure we weren't. So I think that's why a lot of opportunities, people came to us almost like consultants, but not like just, we know you can get things done. So we need to come to you from that. And so we would create businesses around those opportunities.
That's such an interesting concept. I think it's something we're seeing a lot in the market today, or at least I'm noticing, like specifically with AI, you have big companies like OpenAI who've like pretty much been married to Microsoft. They got like, they bought like half the company. Totally. They took 10 billion from, and so they're just like, they don't really have any other option. Then you have other companies like Anthropic, who's raised at this point almost as much as OpenAI, but they've done it from Amazon and Google and you know, rich investors. And and so it seems like the longevity, you can continue if you need to raise money or to work with or to partner when you when you're a little bit more open at that point.
Yeah, so it just gives you more options.
Yeah.
Which as an entrepreneur, more options are helpful.
The best. Okay, so you do these 3 incredible companies. Yes. You make these 3 exits. Like, this is hugely successful. And then you go on. Is this when you started Trulioo, or what became Trulioo?
Yeah. So after our 3rd company, one of the comments that I remember saying to Stephen is, okay, I gave up my 20s for business, and now I want to start a family. And so we were 30, and basically, and I decided that I wanted to start a family and kind of do that life. And Steve said, well, we've got this idea. I'm going to head down to Silicon Valley and with this idea and experience what it is to be down there. And so he headed off down there, and we just started to get traction. And it just, again, like I said about entrepreneurship, just when you think you're out, he came to me and said, listen, we're getting traction. Why don't, do you want in? Do you want to take part of it? And it was interesting because in our bank account, we still had money that was just sort of sitting there. And how he got me was, listen, we could take this money out personally and just get taxed. Right. Or we can like blend this and turn this into a business idea. And since I hate paying taxes if I don't have to, I thought, okay, that makes more sense. And so that's how really that piece got started, where it was, let's see what we can do with this. And Stephen's has an incredible business mind. And he's very much about execution. He can stay with a task. I struggle with that. He can stay with a task and see it to completion. And so for him, it was to go down there and just see what can come of this idea. And so he was down there. We would pitch investors, and I would usually fly down from Vancouver for like the second meetup with a VC. It took about a year and a half of we were down in an incubator called Plug and Play in Sunnyvale, and we pitched investors all the time, like well over 100. Stephen pitched to for sure, and then I would fly down and do the second or third. And it took about a year and a half before we got our first check. And interestingly, Lombard Capital, who invested in us the first time, he was one of the first. They were one of the first investors we ever pitched to. Really? And it took a year and a half before we finally got our first check. So it just goes to show you just keep going. And they watched us over that year and a half and saw us getting traction more and more. And I think that's an important piece too, just to keep going back to investors that you've already pitched to and say, hey, this is how far we've gone already since I last met with you. And that was an important piece too. That makes so much sense, because I think there's a huge chunk of people that a year and a half into just pitching and trying to raise money will have quit or stopped or just been like, look, we can't do this. Yeah. What gave you guys the motivation, the belief? Like, what pushed you guys to keep going for that whole time? Again, I think sometimes as a business owner, the challenge of actually succeeding is what can drive you, not wanting to be denied something you have. And I think, especially for Steve, he's very focused when there's a plan. And I don't think he doesn't give up easily. And so I think that was an important piece that, again, it goes back to that mentality. Like, there's got to be a way to do it. There's got to be a way to get this. And we just haven't figured out how to do it yet. So it's not actually being discouraged necessarily in what the outcome not being where it is. It's that, okay, I just haven't figured out how to do it yet. And we will, we'll not be denied. And so I think that was a big, piece of it, is just saying, we're not going to walk from failure on this one.
I love that. That's amazing. Well, I mean, it reminds me of like, if you've seen the meme or whatever, but it's just like, there's a miner and he's underground with his like pickaxe and he's like an inch away from like the diamonds and he like turns around and quits. And it's like, you never know when you're that inch away from the diamonds, but if you never give up, then you'll always,
100%.
You'll always achieve something.
And I think we really believed in what we were building as well. We really knew that, we had been the experts in that field for over a decade, and we saw where things were going to go, and we really believed in our expertise. We really knew we were the leaders in that industry, and that what we saw as the future was real. And so that was important as well. I think you really have to get to that point where you genuinely, truly believe. And I think you can build a business and have a lot of doubt. I think it's worth working on your doubt and ensuring that you genuinely believe in your business and your concept, because that will get you past a lot of struggles for sure.
Okay, something I have to ask. I want to talk about a little bit about the end of what happened to this company, but you and your co-founder Stephen have been in this thing for a decade together. How is that working with the same co-founder for a decade? Like, how is that relationship? Was that hard? Like, what were some of the challenges? Like, tell me about that.
So, upon reflection, until I wrote the book, I actually had never stopped to really think about what was it about Stephen and I that worked so well when so many other people fail, even just after one business working with somebody. I think what we always put our friendship as a priority. I don't always recommend people do that because there's other factors. But for us, our friendship really mattered. We had a long history together and we really valued that. That was a value point for both of us. So I think we were able to put things under the rug a little bit easier because we really knew each other. And we knew neither of us were ever like twisting our mustache, like, I'm going to get him. I think we genuinely both knew that we were on the same team. And that is something that I often talk to people when they're starting a business with somebody, is to really make sure that that value matches, and that whatever it is that you guys brought you together, that you recognize it and ensure to protect it and keep it going. So I think for Stephen and I, we also really we had a lot of fun together. That was another piece. We didn't always see our work as the task at hand. It was kind of like, oh, I'll see you at work tomorrow. And I think we actually really enjoyed each other's company. So I think that was another piece that allowed us to, we looked fondly on the experience. And so we were happy to do it again the next time. So the same sort of thing, like really try and make that journey interesting and exciting to one another.
I love that. No, I think that's some amazing advice. So along this journey, you raise your first round, and obviously that's exciting. You can kind of get this thing kicked off. I'm assuming you've been self-funding exactly. up until this point. Tell me about some of the challenges you had as you were growing. As I understand, you didn't achieve product market fit immediately on this. So tell me a little bit about how that looked.
Yeah, it's interesting. Right before we raised, we got our check. We had just one payroll left in the bank. That was a classic story.
So you guys were really...
it was like, this check needs to come because, we just kept putting money into the company. And so, a lot of times people think, oh, because you had all these exits, it must have been really easy to start, Trulioo. But we really treated Trulioo like as a new endeavor. And even though we had exits from other businesses, we really wanted to not just keep just throwing money in it because we could. It was like, no, this has to be a legitimate company. So we were always looking at that bank account saying, we've only got, 2 payrolls left or 1 payroll left. And do we need to keep putting money in? So that was a big piece. And again, it was, as with anything, it's a learning curve. And for Stephen and I with Trulioo, the plan was actually, for the first time, we said to each other, let's see how far we can take this one. Like, let's not necessarily plan to have it sold in the first opportunity that we have. Let's see if we can scale these companies and this company and take it to the next level. And so that was, again, the mentality we had. And I think so the decisions we made as we built the business were probably different because we were thinking longer term. And that's why it's so important for entrepreneurs when they get started in their business, especially with a co-founder, that everybody's aligned with what that long-term vision is. Because if we were just planning to sell right away, you know, maybe how we went for funding would have been different, or who we went with. Like, we don't realize how much these little decisions that we make on a day-to-day actually come from our long-term plans. And so because of that, we were able to look at some of the challenges that we had with an eye on, you know what, we're in this for the long haul anyways. So let's make different decisions based on that. So I think that was a big, that helped us get through some of the challenges that we had in the early stages as we were scaling it, just our mentality.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And I think that, again, that vision is like so important for how you grow and where it ends up. So you raise this first round, you kind of get started. I understand. I believe you raised all the way up to a Series D, was it?
No, I was till Series C, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I was there as COO.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what, you know, by the Series C, like, what did the team look like? How many people were on the team?
We grew. Actually, it was B. It's been so long.
Yeah.
We had up to about a team of 40 by the time we raised that round. And then we did our first acquisition as well.
Okay.
So that was a big piece. You know, who you are in the early stages of a business versus the kind of skill set and mentality needed to scale a business are two very different skill sets, I think. And very rarely is that founder able to do both. You know, for me, I flourished in the early stages. And I remember there was a point when one of our engineers kind of looked at us and said, like, we can't change what we're doing right now. Like, we're on this track, like we have to go. And as a early stage entrepreneur, you're always wanting to shift and change. And sometimes when you're scaling, you can't do that. You actually have to follow through with that. And I remember that being a moment where I realized that my passion within the company was changing. And I wasn't as good as accepting the structure that comes into place as your business and company grows.
Yep.
And so that was I think a piece for me that helped me to realize that where I wanted to be with a company long term, I didn't think my skill set was for that. So Stephen is one of those CEOs that can go from inception all the way to full scaling. And so that was sort of I think the beginning of us realizing that there needs to be someone who takes over my position and finding someone with that skill set and passion to go through what it takes to structure and get organized. So I think that was where the shift changed for me.
Okay. I love that. Question for you on that. And also, you know, I feel like a lot of times when we see these tech companies, like, for example, you see Facebook and you see Zuckerberg was there from the very inception and now he's there. But I also feel like we've seen kind of like cycles of like who Zuckerberg is and what he's doing. I feel like in a company, whether you're there from Series A to Series B or from, you know, co-founding to Series A, or you're all the way to there to going IPO, whatever phase of the company you're working in, there's a lot of change and growth you have to do.
Yes.
What were things that I guess you would recommend, or things that maybe you did as your companies were growing to, you know, continue to learn and to evolve as a person in your kind of expanding stewardship or whatever?
Yeah, I think just to look at the two different people, that was myself and Stephen. One of the things that we both had early on, and we always would say to investors, is, look, if we're the best people at the helm, we'll be the people at the helm. But we want this company to succeed. You know, its success begets our success. So we always really were open to recognizing there may come a time when we're not the best people to run the company. And so I think ego can get in the way a little bit, where this is my baby, and it does feel like your baby. And you give so much blood, sweat, and tears into it. You sacrifice so much, not just financially, but a giving of your time and your family life, and all these things come into play that you get very possessive of your business. And I think you have to be able to take a step back and see how important it is that the right person is at the helm, and just doing those gut checks all the time. Am I succeeding? Am I able? Am I the right person? And having a good team around you, and kind of taking their information, like, and just, I think you have to have some element of, I make the final decisions and I know, but I think there's also looking at how is the success in the numbers? How are the people around me? Are they inspired by me as their leader? Stephen, definitely inspired our team when he was the CEO through. And I think as we were building our businesses, in a lot of ways, our team joined because of us. Yeah. They believed in us. They believed in our mission. They believed who we were and the culture we were creating. And I think that's the other component as well as a founder. Do you inspire your team? And I think we did that really well when we were running our companies.
I've heard a lot of people talk about, as they scale up their company, a lot of the early employees sometimes will cycle out because they're just like, look, it's not what it used to be at the beginning. I guess I'd love to hear your perspective on that, and also what you do and did to keep your top talent. Like, how do you keep your solid, your team, like you mentioned at the beginning, to make such a big impact on where the company goes? How do you keep those people?
Yeah, I think it's very real, the mentality of startup people. Startup people love the multiple hats. They love the challenge of getting through the real hard struggles. And we learned early on that you either have a startup mentality or you don't. And, there were times when we brought in people from big companies, Amazon, Google, et cetera, and they say they want the startup life, but then you put them in the startup chair in the middle of the bullpen where everybody else is, and they're like, wait, hold on. Wow, like I have a lot of responsibility. I can't pass this off to that department. I can't just, I don't have access to every tool on the market. Yeah. We're on a budget. I can't access that. And I think for some people that's like tilt. That's too much sort of type of thinking that they don't have. So we were very specific of talking when we were hiring and interviewing, is almost even looking at resumes, how long were they at a company? What stage were they there at? When did they leave? What was it that actually made them leave? And oftentimes you would hear from a true startup founder was that, almost similar to myself, was like, oh, just the company changed. It just, I didn't have the same freedom. I didn't have the same excitement. It wasn't as like, it just wasn't, my job didn't have the same kind of weight. And so we would look for that. And that often brought us the right people for that stage.
Okay. So, and I'm so curious to hear like your side of that and your perspective. Trulioo has gone on to become an incredibly successful company. Like we mentioned at the beginning, has raised hundreds of millions of dollars, has tons of employees. It's helping so many people. I mean, I was looking it up before this and seeing partnerships with JP Morgan Chase and all sorts of incredible stuff that it's doing. So absolutely massive success and so exciting. At this time, you've kind of stepped away from running the company. Yeah. What was that process like? Was that difficult to feel like you were walking away? I've talked and heard from other founders that have had similar things. And like you mentioned, like sometimes you just have to recognize, whether it's your stage of life or the stage of the company, like how that works. But I feel like that doesn't make it any less difficult. So tell us a little bit about how you felt.
I was very fortunate to have had, I don't even know where I got the advice, but if you're leaving your company, begin detaching your identity from it. And at first I thought I didn't attach my identity, but when I left Trulioo, we were kind of really on the uptake. And we were starting to be recognized in Vancouver for, the kind of rocket ship we were becoming. And we're starting to get, more headlines and a lot more accolades about what we had managed to build. And that was when I was leaving. Like I was, I was there when it was all like nothing was happening and nobody was talking about us. And now just finally, as the company's going, I was exiting. And so it was really difficult in that respect to recognize that I wasn't going to be part of that phase of the company, and having to sort of detach myself as, the co-founder of Trulioo, first as my lead point. Who am I now? Who am I without my business? And ultimately, I think when I talk to founders, whenever you exit, I think having that healthy relationship with your identity as it pertains to your business is really, really important. Because even, let's say, if you're still at the helm, you're still the CEO or whatever, you're still part of the company, and let's say the company fails, it doesn't destroy you as a person, because, there's so many other things that could have made that happen. So I think it's really, really valuable for people to detach their identity from their business, so that whatever outcome it ends up being with you in that business, it doesn't take you down with it. Yeah.
I love that. I think it's so important. Inevitably, every person will exit or leave or part ways with their company. And wherever you work, it's such a big part of your identity and what you do. So you are now on to a new exciting project. Yes. And I understand that this one, it seems like it might be slightly different. Tell us a little bit about the Co-Founder Hub and I guess your mission and what your kind of your inspiration for it.
Yeah. So when I knew that I was going to be exiting, I thought, okay, well, what's the next phase? What am I into? And one of the things I do love is public speaking. And so I thought, okay, well, what am I going to talk about? And one of the things that stood out to me, what is it that makes me unique, my journey unique? And that is that I would get asked by a lot of founders to advise them on how to strengthen their partnership. People would ask, how have you built multiple companies?
You are the expert on this of everybody.
Right. Like, how have you done this over 20 years with the same co-founder and you're still friends? And so I began to, really contemplate that. And what was it that made us do so well? And then I started to talk to a few other co-founders, and I discovered what I tagged as silently suffering. And I would hear stories from co-founders who would say things like, my co-founder and I are only speaking through the office manager right now. And this was like a big company. You look at it, you think everything looks so great, but here's the founders, they're not even talking to each other. And this sort of refrain kind of kept coming up over and over again from people who were locked into this business together, and they were struggling, but they had no one to talk to about it. You can't tell your investors that you're having this fight. You can't you can't talk to your employees, and you can't even talk to your family because they're biased. They're always going to give you, well, you're in the right. So I realized that this was a problem. And I realized that there was very little support specifically for the co-founder partnership. And that's when I went, okay, this needs to be filled. And so I wrote the book. I interviewed hundreds of different co-founders on various different topics. Why did you succeed? Why did you fail? What would you have done differently? What would be your advice? And so that's where the book came out, to really cross from the very first question, should I get a co-founder? Some people shouldn't, and some people really should. All the way to, how do I exit this company and still be friends with this person? That was my ultimate goal. How do you leave and still be friends and not burn that bridge? And so that was where the Co-Founders Hub is coming out of that piece of it, as a platform to support co-founders throughout their partnership, to give them all the tools and the support that they need in order to flourish in their role as a co-founder.
Okay, so based off of this book, I mean, this thing looks phenomenal. I'm gonna get it and read it, so don't worry. And I recommend everyone else get the book, read the book. If you are in tech, if you're working on stuff, like, this is important.
It's any industry, actually. Anybody who's got a business partner, you've got to ask the right questions.
100%. What is one just kind of juicy nugget that you can give people that they're gonna find or learn more in the book that would be really useful?
So A lot of times, well, it depends. I'll give you two tidbits. The first one is for those who are looking for a co-founder. That's one of the, if you look at search terms, there's usually two phases where people go to Google and seek help. The first one is, how do I find a co-founder? And the third one is, help my co-founder is. And it's usually some really, really, really bad outcome that's happening. So there's two people that come in. But so the first thing that I tell people to do when it comes to looking for a co-founder that we as entrepreneurs do not do. I know I never did it, and many entrepreneurs that I talk to, they never do it. And that is do a deep dive into who you are as an entrepreneur. What is it that brings you to the table? Why are you building businesses? Like all these questions that people don't think about when they're looking for a co-founder. Usually people go for a skill set. You know, I'm going to open a restaurant, so I need a chef. I'm going to build an app, so I need an engineer. And we think about it in terms of skill sets. But what we don't think about is things like, say, for example, Stephen and I, really ultimately what made us successful was I was excellent at strategy and thinking about all the possibilities and bringing them all together. Stephen was brilliant at taking that path and executing on it. And so that was our synergy. That was our superpower between the two of us. I would have never thought of looking for a co-founder who can execute. I would have said, oh, I'm building a platform. I need an engineer.
Right.
So that I think is the key thing as an entrepreneur. Do a deep, deep dive into who you are, what you bring to the table, what drives you, what's your personality, what's your conflict style, what's your learning style, how do you communicate? Are there any issues? Like you've got a couple of kids. Is that going to tie into how you're an entrepreneur? Does your co-founder need to know that you got to go pick up your kids at school 3 times a week at 3:30 and you have to go? That's a priority. They may resent you for that. So these little things you have to think about. So that's the first thing that I talk to people about as such an important task to undertake when you're looking for a co-founder. And then when you're in a co-founder partnership, the phrase that I use is expectations not communicated lead to resentment.
Okay.
So many times we will say to our co-founder, oh, I thought you were going to do that. Oh, I was expecting you. And those are the moments where, because the ball's been dropped, something's been said, a task isn't completed. There's a moment where I thought we were on the same page and we're not, and you've let me down. So communicating constantly what your expectations are is so important. So communication, but mostly on, I feel like you're going to do this, and then talking about it. So those are the two most important things I would say at two different stages.
Okay. Amazing. I think that's incredible advice. I mean, I'm literally, as you're talking, thinking about myself and my co-founder and my current company, AI Box, and
yes, totally.
things that we should be doing better. So I think this book's amazing. I'm going to read it. I'm excited. Because this is the AI Chat podcast, we're always talking about, right now it's AI and what's kind of going on in tech. I'd be curious to get your perspective on any ways that you think AI, first off, would be impacting like the identity space, because I know you've been in there for 20 years. Like, are we going to have some major issue, and what companies are solving it? What does your company solve with deepfakes and all this kind of stuff? I'm curious your perspective on that.
Totally. You know what? I can't speak into that industry. I remember when I walked away, I said, if I never say the word identity again, I think I might be okay with that.
This is fair.
I can't. But that said, I mean, obviously technology and AI is going to completely change every aspect of who we are, and the capabilities of AI when it comes to identity. I think one of the things that, if I've learned anything about the identity space, is there's obviously a deep trust on government. There's a deep trust in that traditional form of ID. I think because governments and regulatory bodies move so slowly, they're so slow to adapt, that I think that we might overestimate how quickly AI might go into identity. I don't know for sure, but I think that because government's so slow to change, I think we'll see a traditional form of identity verification for a long period of time. So that would be my take on IE or AI in identity. And then in the co-founder space, I think there's a lot of opportunity to identify where challenges might be taken. One of the things we're also looking at applying AI into is helping to find a co-founder, taking data sets on people who are looking either to find a co-founder to bring into their opportunity, or people who genuinely believe they have what it takes to be an entrepreneur. They just can't think up the idea. So they're going, I want to be a co-founder. So using AI to help assess, compatibility between co-founders. That's the kind of piece that we're looking at a little bit right now.
That's so fascinating. Yeah. That's so fascinating. Something that you said earlier, which I think ties into this, is that a lot of times when you're looking for a co-founder, you don't know exactly what you're looking for. You might think I need an engineer or I need an expert in like X, Y, and Z like industry. Not necessarily I need an executor, I need this, and maybe something that is balancing each other's strengths and weaknesses, right? So, I mean, talk to me about like if you were using an AI to kind of like assess this, what are the things that it would be looking at to like make an optimal co-founder match? I'm just like so curious,
exactly.
Like, what does that look like?
So we have a product that's about to launch. It's like a co-founder assessment series. Okay. And basically what we do is we take all of the components that sort of make you up. Those things that I talked about before. What is it that you bring to the table? And we bring that out through a really in-depth really introspective, a really in-depth piece to help you discover who you are. But just like a lot of assessments, like DISC assessment, all these things, we're able then to say, okay, you're scoring really high on this side, or your conflict style is about confrontation. Okay. And saying, if you're a confrontation type conflict style, and you're jumping into, say, a particular business that, like a daycare, right? Right. Like you may want somebody then who is more about collaboration or different things. So being able to take all these components and then finding what works best in that industry in this particular way, what works best at this stage of a company or in this industry, and then bringing those together and just trying to find that algorithm really that comes together to say, yeah, you need to match here. You're really intense in this one way. Or because of the way you are here, you need to counterbalance with that. And we can do that right now just by having the conversation and really thinking through situations. Just like we did there with the conflict style. Right. So AI can easily do that. It's just sort of figuring out how do I give that to you? I want to make sure that I'm not giving you a prescription of the kind of co-founder you need and then it doesn't work out. So I think that's where that technique needs to be honed. But there's so much possibility and so much potential in using AI for that way.
That's fascinating. That sounds exciting. I'm also excited to see that tool when it launches. What's something that a common misconception or something that people are commonly getting wrong when picking a co-founder today or finding that person?
So the statistic is that 36% of people go into business with their friend. And it's just you and I were shooting the breeze one night. We came up with, hey, that would be a great idea. And they just jump into this idea with their friend because they talked about it and it only seems fair or makes sense that we build a business together. And I think the biggest mistake that people make is they don't really work on compatibility and talk about it ahead of time. Because the last thing you want to do when you've got this vision for a business, you're going to be the next Facebook, you totally know you're going to rock it. The last thing you want to say to somebody is, so, what happens if you get addicted to drugs, or what happens if you don't show up to work and you're lazy? No one wants to talk about these really real potentials when everything is got so much optimism and possibility ahead. So one of the things that I often tell people, again, is just really make sure that you have the conversation about your partnership. Talk about your business model. Talk about how you're going to create revenue. Talk about how you're going to scale an incredible product and improve upon whatever issue. But do not dismiss the issues that could arise between your partnership. Because in that respect, 65% of partnerships built between partners will fail because of issues between the partners. That's massive, 65%. Huge. So you already have a chance of failure just because you have a partner. So you can't, a co-founder partnership is not a set it and forget it kind of thing. It's just, I don't always like to parallel it to a marriage, but it is about a relationship that you have to be intentional on a daily basis, saying this person and I, we're a team, we're in it together, and we're going to move forward together despite our idiosyncrasies and despite our incompatibilities. We're going to be intentional. But the best way to do that is to, in the very beginning, make sure you actually are compatible. Make sure you understand each other's vision for the business and you're both on board. So that's an important piece.
I love that. I think that's such amazing insight on how that is. As we wrap up today, it's been phenomenal having you on. What's one piece of advice you feel like you can give people in maybe business in general and kind of startups and what it takes to make something successful?
I think one of the things that I would do, and one of the messages I have right now, is I think there's no time. It hasn't been so important to be an entrepreneur like it is today. The world is getting smaller, and the ability to see issues within the country is so obvious. And I think entrepreneurs are dreamers, and they make the world better. And so one of the things is I often say to entrepreneurs, if you see a challenge that you think you can fix, you owe the world to go and do it. And I think we need to uplift our entrepreneurs, their founders, their dreamers. They see the world in a different way, and they're willing to sacrifice. You know, someone who sees a problem and they're willing to put their money where their mouth is, they're willing to sacrifice their time. That is so important. So to me, I'm always encouraging entrepreneurs, and I'm encouraging people like myself and people who've had success to really get out there and support entrepreneurs, VCs to get back into the seed stage again and really invest and take those risks because it's so important for our world. It's so important for our economy. It's so important that we solve these problems, and entrepreneurs are the ones that do it. So
I love that. Amazing message, amazing advice.
Thanks.
Tanis, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Awesome.
If people are interested in connecting with you or following along on what you're working on, what's the best way for them to do that?
So there's two routes. You can go to the cofoundershub.com. And then obviously too, just on LinkedIn, Tanis Jorge. You can do that. But Co-Founders Hub, stay tuned for our release of our Co-Founder Mastery Series.
Super exciting. And to the listener, I'll leave links in the show notes for you to get the Co-Founders Hub and to her LinkedIn so that you can follow along. Thank you so much for tuning in to the podcast today. If you enjoyed the podcast, it would mean the world to us if you left us a review or a comment on YouTube or follow us on Spotify or Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. And I hope that you all have an amazing rest of your day.